So maybe you always thought Scouts was the first youth club in the UK, or even in fact the world, but no, there was a youth club before Scouts, 20 years before we started. But what's that youth group? Well, I'm going to tell you next here on Big Man in the Woods. So let's fly up right to the top of our island, up in Glasgow. And in 1883, a young army officer by the name of William Smith, who was connected to the church, was part of the Sunday school, just wanted a bit more. And he came up with this youth club. The first Glasgow Boys Brigade was started in 1883. So we often think that the Scouts came first, but no. Our founder, Baden-Powell, teamed up with William Smith and got the idea of Scouts. And you remember the first Brownsea Island trip that Baden-Powell took those boys from London out to the sticks? All right, well, it was to Brownsea Island in Dorset. Well, those boys included 4 Boys Brigade members. So what is the real difference between Boys Brigade and Scouts? Well, when I was a youth back in the day, I always used to see the Boys Brigade out and about parading along with the Scouts. But my memories of the Boys Brigade is more of a kind of marching band. I always used to see them with the hat and maybe a trumpet and it was very badly played trumpet. I remember that. That's my memories of the Boys Brigade. What's yours? But what's the difference between Boys Brigade and Scouts? If Baden-Powell took that idea back in whenever it was, 20 years before he came up with Scouts, is there a big difference? Well, I've been doing a whole lot of research here and pretty much not really. The big main emphasis between Boys Brigade and Scouts is that Boys Brigade is heavily Christian based and they're connected to a church. So some Scout groups, as we know, are connected to churches, but every single Boys Brigade company is connected to a church. And I'm going to read you a little quote from the Boys Brigade website. Obviously, the main distinction between the brigade and the Scouts is that they are rooted in the Christian faith. That is still our unique selling point. Let's look at what they do. Do they do anything differently than we do in Scouts? Well, they are titled differently. They have 4 different sections. Anchors. They're children aged between 5 to 8. So a bit like squirrels / beavers. Then they have juniors, and they're aged 8 to 11, so cubs. Then they have the company, which is 11 to 14, scouts. And then they have seniors, 14 to 18, explorers. But what are those different badges? Do they do something differently than scout? I could be here all night if I took each section. But as a scout leader, I dived into company. So that's the equivalent of the Boys Brigade's scout section. And the company program is designed into 6 different zones. Get active, get into the Bible, get creative, get learning, get adventurous, and get involved. So I dived into those little sections a bit more, and I couldn't really tell any difference, apart from into the Bible. You know, years ago, Scouts was religious. We've moved on for that. Yes, religion does play a part in scouting today, but it's predominantly not that anymore. Boys Brigade go camping, they learn these new skills. They don't have the strapline for skills for life, but just looking at those badges are more or less identical to Scouts. They go out camping, they learn about survival, they learn about bushcraft, they learn about knots. Those skills that we do in scouting is what they do in the Boys Brigade. But it all goes back to church, back to that Christian faith. So they will have maybe a session on reading the Bible, they pray together. It's all fundamentally rooted back to that Christian faith and back to the church. So what's the difference? Why do boys go to Boys Brigade and why do they come to Scouts? Well, it's a bit like, why do boys play football and why do some boys play rugby? It's about preference, and I guess it's about how you're brought up as well. So maybe if you are brought up in a Christian faith and your family goes to church and Sunday school, that church is going to probably be connected to a Boys Brigade. And it may be that the leaders from the Boys Brigade come to visit the Sunday school and you get to know the leaders that way, and then you kind of just follow those steps. I don't know, to be honest. I guess the question could be, why do people go to Scouts and not Baden-Powell Scouts, the original Scouts, traditional scouting? I don't know. I can't think. What I think the fundamental thing is about your upbringing. Some people are brought up in a religious way. in a religious family and they follow from Sunday school into the Boys Brigade. Maybe you've just joined your area and there is no Scouts and all there is the Boys Brigade. Is there any big difference between Boys Brigade and Scouts? No. In a Boys Brigade, you can still do your Duke of Edinburgh. Okay, it's not as big, they don't have the PR behind them, they don't have kind of events that you go off to Windsor Castle, that kind of thing for St. George's Day Parade, but they are a big youth organisation. They're older than Scouts, and they're still going just as strong as Scouts. It's just that they don't have that big PR behind them. You don't often see them on the telly. You don't have big celebrities backing and endorsing them like our ambassadors and our Chief Scout Bear Grylls. They don't have that big celebrity PR media team behind them like we do in Scouts. But that's my personal view. Maybe there are other reasons why people go to Boys Brigade compared to Scouts. I think it's just one of those family traditions. Maybe you as a boy went to Boys Brigade and your son is now part of that brigade. It's all about traditions and upbringing, I guess. And yeah, maybe you've gone to that town and they don't have a Scout and there's only a Boys Brigade. But looking into it, I can't really see that massive divider. Like in Scouts, we do this, and in Boys Brigade, we do this. And we don't do different things. They go camping, they still do those things, like I explained. So the only big thing I can see the difference is that Boys Brigade still has Christian faith deeply rooted into it. Unlike Scouts now, where we accept all faiths into Scouts. Boys Brigade is only available for the Christian faith. There we are. The big difference between Boys Brigade and Scouts. Do you know any other fascinating facts that I've missed out? Comment below. Maybe you were a member of Boys Brigade as a youth member and you thought, actually, nope, I jumped ship. Maybe you do both. I don't know. But just looking at the program, it looks very, very similar. Or have I misinterpreted it? Anyway, guys, till next time, thank you very much, and I'll see you next time here on Big Man in the Woods. Bye-bye!